Welcome to this section. It's the second section of the keynote speech. It gives me great pleasure to introduce the speaker. Many of you already know Kozao very well, but I think this is a good opportunity for me to mention some of his accomplishments. Kozao graduated from the National Taiwan University in 1975. He earned his PhD degree from Berkeley in 1981, then got a job at Purdue University, but he only stayed there for a few years, then moved to LA. He liked LA a lot, okay. And he received many honors. To me, I think the most important thing I think about Kozao is a pioneer. He did very important creative work about slice inverse regression and PSD. That is a dimension reduction in very early stage. And even now, a lot of people use his slice inverse regression and the PSD type of method to do dimension reductions. So he's somewhat ahead of us about 20 years. After a while, he moved on to do liquid association for the genomic type of stuff. So that's the reason I mentioned he liked LA a lot. And this morning, he's also talking about liquid association for investigating high-dimensional data. Kozao.
Well, I really like to give a talk in Chinese, but I was given a warning yesterday. No, that's not what I should do. Okay. However, I still like to use Chinese for thank you, do a special thanks. Then I will switch to English. Okay. 我非常感谢这个。机会来跟各位做一些研讨，但是呢，我必须要acknowledge， 当我接到这个简所长的邀请的时候，我心里头首先是吓了一跳，说，哎，奇怪，我一辈子没有做过 economics data 的人，怎么会被邀请到这么一个重要的场合 ？And I hesitated 然后我本来是想，这个，因为他也没说一定我本来讲说是这个就拒绝了，说我不做这一行，所以对不起。不过后来想一想的话，这个也不太好，因为也许是有其他的原因的。那我仔细想一下，我想起大概1年前刁先生很 eager 的after 听了我有一个演讲，事实上就有关于 liquid association。他说：“你应该找机会跟这个经济所的同仁好好的谈一谈，他们说不定会很有兴趣。”所以就这样子，我就答应了。Okay, all right, I'll switch back to English. So this is going to be a talk not about forecasting, and you will not see any economic data analysis. I'm brave enough to give such a talk in front of you, the bona fide econometricians, and we'll see how it goes. I understand the general theme of this conference is about big data, and that makes me even more nervous because as many of you probably have known that the biggest event on this AI or big computer system, including the large data, is this AlphaGo. This system beats the best Go player in the world, Li Song, in 5 games, 4-1. That's amazing. And AlphaGo's algorithm uses a Monte Carlo tree search to find its move based on knowledge previously learned by machine learning, especially by artificial network, and in parentheses, deep learning. And for if you want to get more information, you can read this Nature paper. It's very mathematically enriched, a lot of details. I'm really amazed. I must confess, I know very, very little of it. It's just amazing achievement. Luckily, our institute, Statistics Institute, earlier this year, invited, sorry, not very early, it's September, only 3 months ago, invited Professor Li Sunxi. He is a professor at 师范大学, to come to give a talk. He has a PhD student named Huang Eja. You can see the name here. That's marvelous because the according to the information I got is that they first developed a very creative team, a program called ERIC, and then the Go developer, this Google DeepMind found it, and they recruit him and do the further development. So that's a key development. So I think that instead of inviting me, you should invite Professor Sunxin Li to talk about the big data and how this assistance. You know, the chase or go is more like the way that economization is facing. We are trying to set up a good strategy, try to see the other move, right? And the amazing development in this is that, hey, the human beings is not as good as the computer if you are fully programmed, but it uses a lot of data analysis and a very good strategy. But still, I accept this talk, so I dig further to see what are these big data area, how it's been perceived in general. Well, of course, it's been talked by many people, and most of them are strong advocates, except Michael Jordan. This Michael Jordan is not the Chicago Michael Jordan, but it's a great computer scientist and statistician at UC Berkeley. He make I would say a shock of waves because he is a person. He's a computer scientist. He knows a lot of machine learning and so on, and he is even was chosen to write an introduction to National Research Council report on the massive data that area. Okay, called the Frontier in Massive Data Analysis. So his credential is without challenge. And he was interviewed by this person, this writer, Lee Gorman, and published the interview in IEEE Spectrum about 2 years ago. And look at what this title is. Machine Learning, Maestro, Michael Jordan, and Delusion of Big Data, and other huge engineering effort. And it says that big data, bonugos, and brain-inspired chips are just two of the things we are really getting wrong. That's really generated a lot of the debate, and I think he received a lot of heat. And there's this jargon says over-equal adoption of big data is likely to result in catastrophes of analysis comparable to a national epidemic of collapsing bridges. So this is fun to read. I'm not sure what he is going to say once if he was interviewed again this year to see how this AlphaGo triumphed. Okay, but anyway, this is the part that I found is very interesting and probably stands for now. So he was asked why big data could be a big fail, phrased in this way, and Michael Jordan replied, when you have large amount of data, your appetite for hypothesis tends to get even larger. And if it's getting faster than the statistical strength of the data, then many of your inferences are likely to be false. They are likely to be white noise. And he himself, in fact, devoted a lot of energy to study to mathematically prove that things can go really wrong. Okay, so that's interesting. Now, so I look back about what I have done and then try to think if there's any thing which is comparable to be, able to ride this wagon of big data or drag it, and also relate with the time series. And I come up with this paper I wrote with a former student of mine, Kirby Shadden. And so it's called the identification of shared component in large assembles of time series using dimension reductions. So this is in 2002, and later on, I think probably last year, I did not follow the literature a long time, but last year when I have some interest in this topic, and I found that there's a paper published in Biometrica called the Dimension Reduction Determinisms and the Dynamic Factor Models by Piana. And what he says is that, the method we introduced there is nothing new. It's equivalent to the dynamic factor model introduced by Piana and Box. Right, so that's what actually when Kirby and I wrote this paper, I did send it to George for comment, and he's nicely say some good words, but he did not mention this relationship with us. So anyway, if people are interested on this type of things, you're welcome to see whether this statement is correct or not, and what's the difference there. Okay, now, so after knowing that I would not be able to do much in this talk about the things related with the economics, data, or time series, I would like to talk about what I've been good at recently, and hopefully that the way I sort of struggle through this equally difficult type of the rich data environment can be an experience of success or failure for you to follow or disapprove in your economic world. All right, so this is the outline, and this is what I'm going to talk about. And in fact, at the end of the day, once you understand all this project try to say, and that's the end. Okay, so this is more about the conceptual work rather than the detail. Okay, so I've been interested in biological data inspired by this high throughput assistant. Biology recently has a tremendous advance on how to sequence the biomolecules, including the DNA and protein and so on. And what the data has generated is quite large. And that has generated a lot of interest from the statisticians, and that includes me, of course. So the gene expression data analysis is not so easy. There's various reasons. At the very low level, there's an image analysis and so on. The idea is that there's some instrument that can help you to measure the exact amount of the genes in whatever terms that has been expressed. But that simple goal will never be fully accomplished. There's a lot of errors involved there, and everything is relative, and at most you do things directly. For example, the best things we know, you want to count how many molecules here, just count, right? 1, 2, 3. But there's no way you can count. So they have to indirectly, using this frozen dye, try to get a sense of how many of them. That's created a lot of problems. That's basically what it is. And so there are statisticians like to talk about normalization and so on. And Terry Speed, one of the pioneers doing that. Anyway, so if you are being lucky enough, at the end of the day, you got this clean data matrix, and then statisticians usually start from here and doing some work. All right, so this is the table. So you have a gene 1, gene 2, and so on, and then under different conditions, and hopefully there's nothing missing here. And then you will try the method, statistical method you could, and try to get some information out of it. For example, in the early days, there's a good data set concerning the yeast cell cycle. So the yeast on the different stage of the cell division and the growth and so on. So biology want to see what's going on in each phase. So they would grow the cells and they harvest at different time point, and then they get to this microarray and to get the gene expression data. So it looks like a time series, right? Because there's a time course then. So you may imagine that, well, we got to use a time series analysis and so on. But no, the biologists don't understand the time series. They don't know what's the AR1 or probably things like that. Okay, they know a little bit about the Fourier transform, so there's some work doing this simple Fourier phase type of the analysis. But anyway, they still can get some important methods to get close, and one of them is to produce a chart like this. Okay, there's a lot of the genes. They will find a class of the genes that seems to be of great interest, and they can show this pattern. And in this one, the red indicates the gene expression level is very high, and the green is very low. So you can see that there's a group of the genes here. The behavior are similar, and so on. And the biologists are very happy because previously these molecular functions can only be confirmed by going through a lot of different type of the wet lab experiment. But now they can all see it here. So all these genes are participating in certain functions together. So this is the triumph of demonstrating the power of using this more or less indirect measurement of the messenger RNA to do the functional interpretation. Okay, now I would like to bring in statistics. Well, this without going much mentioning that Galton is the one that's been responsible for connecting regression with correlation, and his most famous paper is introducing the regression is using this biometric data about the height And what it says here, I cannot read, but the picture says more here. He has been able to look at the data and then carefully plot it using, everything's handmade. There's no computer at that time. It's amazing. And he can see that, well, there's an ellipse here, and there's a line here and there, and that's our regression line and so on. So that seems to me the biggest discovery in data analysis before the modern computer was invented. The relationship with the gene expression study is that those molecular biologists, with the help of the computer scientists, they produce these clusters that I earlier displayed. It's based on their intuition, the biological intuition. It says that genes with high degree of expression similarities are likely to be functionally related, and may participate in common pathways, and they may correlate by their common upstream regulatory factors. Put it simply, profile similarity implies functional association. And the similarity is measured by the correlation. Okay? You can have a lot of different way of measure similarity, but looks like they prefer correlation in general. Now, how did I jump into this area? I was, I'm a mathematician, and so I like to think things in reverse order. So if somebody tell me if A then B, I would ask what's the converse. If B then A, and it turns out in this case that if you present the problems differently, then clearly the answer is no. So expression profile majority are correlated, and I can find you tons of examples. They are not, so clearly it's not. But that's not a big deal, because the biologists can counter with this. Most functionally associated do not have that similarity because for example, proteins rarely work alone. Protein has multiple functions, different biological process, the pathway has to be synchronized, and so on, competing finite resources, and a lot of protein modifications going on. So you get totally fooled by their answers. And they can even point out, look how complicated this metabolic pathway, for example, is. There's a lot of genes here, or this is our protein, but they can be coded by certain genes, and the expression can certainly interfere with others. How would you be able to analyze that? And of course, you do not expect that the correlation can catch all. All right, so a lot of this pathway are not linear. They would involve feedback systems. So that's the complexity of the world. So we are facing this dilemma. Suppose that you know all the molecules in a cell, and you've been able to measure it exactly, because everything is just molecules bumping into another molecule. So you can have a good mathematical model to follow how they interact with that. But that would take enormous amount of time, and probably I'm not sure AlphaGo team probably can do it, and I cannot. Okay. And there are a selection aspect, because after this, and the fitness functions and so on. So since that it's complicated, and I still have to produce something, so I saw that maybe I will try some statistical way of bypassing this difficulty. And that comes up with this liquid association idea. So this cartoon explains very simple situations. The overall, say there's a gene here and there's another gene here, and they are supposed to be functionally associated. So you would expect that this will probably go this way or this way, right? This should have certain relationship. But imagine that if you have a situation that the cell has a different state, and under a certain state, state 1, they probably correlated. But if the state changed, then that probably getting to the other directions. And then there will be some transitions, then there's nothing in there. Okay? So this is the picture first I stick out. At this stage, it's just mathematical speculation and just try to invent. There may be some situation you don't see it, okay? And then the next difficulty is that how do you justify it? You cannot tell a story without any biological support, right? You can find the data that fits this description. So I search hard and I focus on something called the transcription factor, because all the genes has to be expressed. It's not automatic. It has to be under certain regulation. And there's some protein called the transcription factors. If you bind it to the upstream of the gene, then it will activate it. But there are a certain type of transcription factor. It will just do the opposite. And so there are activators, there are repressors. So that's why this gene can have the control. Otherwise, it just keep activating it, and the system is going to go wild. So there are activators, or the transcription factor can be classified as activators or can be classified as repressor. However, I found from the literature there are situations that transcription factors can be both activator and repressors, all depending on certain other molecule. And I'm not going to go to the details here, but in this case, there's depending on the absence of the thyroid hormone, these transcription factors can be either activators or without its presence, then that becomes a depressor. There's a biological or molecular mechanism to explain that. So I was quite happy because well, at least there's some instances. Okay, so this, and then I come up with some difficult issue here. Okay, so in that examples, there's a third molecule that involved here. It's a thyroid hormone. Okay, now how am I going to measure it? I'm not a biologist, so there's no way I can conduct an experiment. And in fact, the gene expression data, I cannot find that information. So it got stuck. Then I for a while, then come with this idea. I'm sorry. So that's this hint here. So I speculate that in that example, this hormone probably is not going to be always there. And when it's there, they're probably going to do because of certain other activity, because of the activity of other genes. So I'm speculating. So this again, just speculation. I speculate that probably there's a gene whose expression is correlated with that hidden molecule. And so in general, I was speculating there's a certain genes whose expression with high or low will be dictating the transit of the state. Okay? So now I finally got these three putting together, and then the rest of them is just computing. All right, so now, so I have the X and Y, which is a true study to see if they are correlated or not, and if they are not, and there may be a certain genes there. So we are talking about X, Y, and Z. So imagine that in East, there are 6,000 genes to study. And so 6,000 choose 3, then there are around 36 billion combinations. And in a human, there are 50,000 genes. Well, actually, there are not so many genes, but some genes will be have different probes there. So typically, you will run into 50,000 probes. And so it leads to about 20 trillion combinations. So that's a lot of computing you had to do if you want to do it at a time. So I would not be able to do it. Okay? So what can I do? I have to resort to some mathematics. So here is the theory. If I have reformulate our problem as this, x, y, z, they are random variables. So this is just like the gene expression for 3 genes. Normalize it so that the random variable has been 0, variance 1. Now, when you try to find this correlation, x, y, then that's just simple. It's just expectation of the x, y. And expectation of x, y can be further written as the expectation of the conditional expectation of x, y given z. And let's call this as a function of the z. Now, ideally, we would like to see how when this third variable change, because when z is going from a high to low, this correlation should change, right? So we are trying to figure out how this function is varied. And so simple calculus tell me that I should look at the derivative. So g prime z is the derivative of the g function. And therefore, here comes the first definition of liquid association. It's just expectation of g prime z. And then, how do I estimate it? Well, I use a Stein lemma, which needs this assumption that the z is a standard normal. Using the Stein's lemma, it says that any function you want to estimate the expectation, the derivative of that function's expectation of that the derivative of the g function, you can simply take the expectation of that original function times z. And so play with this, immediately find that liquid association, as defined earlier, is nothing but the expectation of the x, y, z. Okay? And so with this simple formula, I can come up with an estimate easily. And that's simply this. So first, I will convert the gene expression profile into normal distribution by using normal score transformation. And then after that, I simply take the product of the 3 variables and then take the simple average. Okay, so this is simply an extension of the Fisher-Yates correlation, which is simply the product average. Okay, Fisher-Yates assume that x and y are normal, and they use this. So if you do not have a normal data, they would prefer to transform to the normal distributions, and that seems to be a good suggestion. It seems to me, although sometimes you will miss something. Suppose if your data has some bimodality there, of course this is not a good thing. But that's a different story. Okay, so with that method, I can do some simple statistics to find out p-values and so on to determine whether the score is significant. So now it's ready to see how it works. And so what took me a little while, let me see. So this pathway, let me see if I can go back to here. All right. So this is a sketch of the major metabolic pathway, and it's very complicated. There's a variety of components here. And now what I'm focused on is this little circle here. Okay, just a portion of it. And so it's a loop. So the relationship between this molecule, so this enzyme, so these are the metabolite, and these breaks are the enzymes. So the metabolite will convert from one thing to another thing. That if you have the presence of the enzyme, in this case, converting from arginine to citrulline, you require arginine, ARG3, and so on. So to study this complex network is not that easy. And luckily, I noticed that this pathway has two beginning points here, and I call it the gate. Okay, so this is the head of this pathway, the glutamate, on the series of metabolic reactions. It will eventually convert to arginine, and this is the essential purpose of this pathway, because the arginine is not automatically synthesized. It's an important amino acid, but it requires processing. And so if you look at this, we are not all this biochemists. I was not even quite familiar with when I started. But the chart can explain what's going on in the cell. That's the beauty of the graph. You see that from here, you require ARG2 and the other steps to get this, right? And then there's an arrow here. So if you have ARG3, it will move here. But from this part here, you can see that it can also go this way. And that's the back door. So in order to force it to go this way, this part has to be shut down. Otherwise, it will be immediately degraded. So if the cell needs arginine, one speculation will be ARG3 has to be upregulated and the CAR2 has to be downregulated. That causes a negative association between these two genes. Okay? And now let's look at the data. Well, this is the data. How the thing looks like. This is ARG2 and this is the CR2. Temporarily forget about this two lines here. The data looks like this. This is a mess. There's no correlation. We hope that they should have a clear negative association, but it doesn't. Okay? So what's going on? So this is what I do. I resort to this liquid association idea. So I put X as the expression of ARG2, Y as the expression of CR2. And I don't know what's going on there. Probably there's a lot of genes there, and probably there are other genes outside, and probably something else that may change the expression pattern. And so I do a global search. So I let the Z to cover all the 6,000 genes. And I compute the liquid association score using the simple formula I have, and I rank them. And then at the eighth place on the negative side, the gene that liquid association can have the positive score and can also have the negative score. On the negative side, the eighth most negative genes is this. Okay, out of 6,000. So I was very happy, extremely happy to see this result there. So I find a gene which is quite relevant and is ranked well, and then of course the p-value is significant. But p-value is not just one thing in statistics. A lot of people were just so crazy about it. What's the more important thing is this. So according to this liquid association, the way they construct it, it is negative value. So which means that when the CPA2, okay, this CPA2 is low, it must have a positive correlation, and when it is high, it has a negative correlation. So it is changing from the positive to the negative correlation. So the score will be negative. Now, if it is positive, then it just goes the opposite. So this time change is more important, right? So although p-value is significant, but if I got a slight change the opposite way, the story will not make. Why? Because this is what we expect, to have the negative correlation. Okay, so I will explain this. So this happens when CPA2 is high. So that means that this enzyme has to be plentiful. And that makes a lot of sense, because if this is high and this one is low, and then glutamate will be converted to enzyme. But in order to go this way, it needs to have the ARG2 and also needs to have this metabolite. And this metabolite is only available because you activate CPA2 to convert the glutamine into this carbonyl phosphatase. So whole things all patch up well now because this one is activated. So in short, this one is up, this one is up, so the two can cooperatively make sure that this process goes this way and eventually generate arginine. So that's the story. Now, if you imagine the other way around, then you just flap your face and say, hey, you got the biggest artifact of your method. Okay, so always be careful. Most often, the p-value do not tell you the right directions, and before you do any publications, you have to be consulting the expert or pretending that yourself is an expert. Okay. Now, there are many ways of doing this. What I just demonstrated is starting from XY and then find some important modulators. You can do the opposite way. Suppose that you have just one genes and you want to see how it can modulate the expressions of other pairs of genes. You can just do the opposite. So you put this one as the Z and then do it the other round. Okay, so and the notion of X, Y, Z are not that important according to our formula because it's all symmetric. Okay, so that's another advantage of this formulation, and I do that using another data set. This one has to do with the I think multiple sclerosis. Okay, I found a lot of genes are relevant. So I'm not going to talk about those details. And you may ask, then when I just do what I just do is just the two genes or two variables. Can you extend to more variables? Yes, you could, and have these projective ideas there. So the basic idea is that if you have a group of the genes and whose correlation may be changed there, and I'll try to look at the liquid association, and you have to do some linear combinations. What? No. Okay. So you have to do some projection idea to reduce the two dimensions. So that's what I did. And if you're interested, you can look at my paper. But this is generally you do the linear combination, and then after do a linear combination, you can resort to by various situations. So you can come up with a score of this, and you convert this into a matrix, and then you have to do is to do the maximization over a pair of orthogonal projection and so on. Okay, so and there's a theorem tell you you can do once you got this the correct matrix, you can do a eigenvalue decomposition of this matrix and look at the right combination of the eigenvectors, and so on. Then you will get the right answer. All right. So that's what I would like to convey to you. And now let's move on. By the way, you have any questions? As the Professor Tsai says, the more you ask, then the less I talk. But I don't think I have much to talk at this moment, not much. But I would like to bring in this big goal or big project under the President Obama, this precision medicine initiative. It has enormous impact on the economy in the future, I think. So what's relevant to the statistician or the big data is that they want to create a voluntary national research cohort enrolling 1 million or more Americans. These are all volunteers. Okay, what they want to want this volunteer to contribute is diverse sources of data, including medical records, profile patients' genes, metabolites, microorgans in bodies, environmental and lifestyle, and so on. And hopefully these numbers, and including your lifestyle, that's your personal device and the sensor and so on. Okay, so it's really big. It's not just the biology or anything. It will really, change the whole economic activities. Now, sticking back to the part that has to do with molecular biology, what I just told you is just gene expression. But in the body, gene expression is just one part of it. There are molecules from DNA, RNA, and protein involved in a different technique. And you probably heard about, so our lab has been doing different type of the assay, including this the copy numbers, and you see the data are really messy, and you need to do some trimming and so on, try to clean up and so. And also the next generation sequences generating tremendous amount of the data that need to be stored and processed carefully. So each step, require a careful planning. And so the dream of this precision medicine is actually, I don't know when it's going to be really fulfilled. And I joked, I was invited to give a talk, I think in September. The feature of this workshop is precision medicine. I'm the only statistician here as a keynote speech. So I started with joking that the reason that we talk about precision something is because we don't know anything about it, or because the lack of precision is everywhere, and you can really see that all the data, all this biology knowledge is just lack of the precision. And only because we don't know about it, that's why we are talking about it. And this is the whole part of the ball game. And it requires a lot of computing facility, to say. And I can summarize that the current thing in exploring biological data is high dimensionality, nonlinearity, and complex pattern of interaction between variables. And therefore, that's invited a lot of mathematical talented people to formulate a problem and doing creative work. You need strategies to deal with it. Okay, so this is just some of the and all the tasks usually has to be customized. Otherwise, you're going to be in big trouble. You cannot just follow those existing tools there, because each general lab is just different. It's just not possible. You find the errors and errors. Oh, okay, then you will get frustrated. So, so this talk is about the extended notion. of correlation called the liquid association for bettering the rationale of analytics and toolkits for investigating complex high-dimensional data. So I worry about whether I'm using the right term for this analytics. So I look at the Google, Wikipedia, and it has this very nice description. Analytics is the discovery, interpretation, and communication of meaningful patterns in the data. They are the multidiscipline and so on. So, must confess, I have no successful story of LA to tell for this audience yet, and you are welcome to apply that for precision economic forecasting. Okay? But you are at your risk. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor Lee, for the very nice introduction to what he did in the past. It's quite imagine. Now the floor is open. Any questions?
I had a great talk. I was listening to another talk on this morning about instrument variable in economics. I think that relates to your thing. So I think I'm right to recommend you talk to the economists. That's all.
I'm very happy to listen with the feedback on this big brains. Economies has a lot of the theories and they are
hidden correlation can change everything.
Yes? You can use your microphone.
In case I express in English, because I haven't used English for a long time, may I use Chinese? Yeah. 作为一个社会学家哈，经济学家，今天啊得到非常大的启发哈。这个您的演讲对我有很大的启发哈。这个我们通常在社会经济学家最大的政策研究者，就是希望说找出这个两个政策的相关性哈，相关性就是在做这件事情，没有什么大不了的哈。但是呢，我们常常就是非常 focus 在 linear 哈，或是简单一点的 non-linear 的相关性而已，就忘记了说这个有比如说 x 跟 y， 可是受很多 z 的因子的影响，这个 association 会改变。可是我们经济学家常常都没有办法做这件事情。所以今天从你的这个 LA 方法，我得到非常大的启发哈。我另外一个很大的启发，想跟您跟听众们分享一下，就是我发现长期以来，我发现经济学家哈，一天到晚哈就想做理论的突破，一天到晚都是 focus 在这个技术性的 estimation 的方法上的改善，忘记了这个 data talk 是很重要的data 才是真实的，它代表我们的真的走向。我常常都忘记做这件事情，一天到晚在讨论这个 technique 的改善有什么了不起？实际上对解决现实问题一点帮助都没有，对解决政策问题一点帮助都没有，却找不出真正的原因。所以我觉得这个从统计学家来跟我们讲这件事情，我突然觉得好像又回到学生上课一样，又得到很大的启发。我希望我从今天开始以后的工作会有很大的改变。谢谢。
You want to make some comment?
I have no comment because thank you for this compliment. I have nothing to say because as I said, I have no experience at all about this economic war there. I know roughly I know it's very competitive and a lot of studies, and we are under this so-called big data now, which means that you can have access here and there. However, most technique we can be more rigorous develop. It's only a very tiny little part, and you certainly need to have other type of expertise. Try to do all these different ideas, different methods together, and so perhaps that with the collective efforts, we can build a very
Any other questions or comments? Yes.
Okay. One model that we use in economics that I can think of, which is related to this liquid association, is the threshold model. So, nonlinear AR model. But typically, we will have, two regimes, but the sign actually normally would not be different. So in biological data, the example you showed that they have exact opposite effects. And in the economic, I just cannot think of examples like this. So going back to the liquid association, do you also find some similar effect for change in the association, but the sign remains the same?
Yeah, it could happen. Yeah, definitely. The formula does not enforce that the correlation has to be changing from negative to positive. As long as it's say going for no correlation to a strong positive correlation, that would be captured by the liquid association. And you can imagine there will be a lot of different type of the association change. Okay? And the formula I gave is very simple. It's just a G, taking derivative and then taking the expectation. And the only reason I do that is because I'm a mathematician. I like to play with the formulas, and I like to get things very simple. And so I use this sign lemma and so on. I got something very simple. I do believe that simplicity is quite important. You can make it more sophisticated. But in order to communicate with non-technical persons, you need to have something which is very simple. And so I think I like the correlations a lot. It's the first things that we would learn from this probability and so on. And of course, learn a lot from George. And he's the AR models, and I say, oh gosh, that's really great stuff there. Before we do this Fourier analysis, and I must get, well, I don't understand what that my Fourier analysis. So simplicity is important, and so that's why I do it. But certainly, you can extend it into different situations, make it more complicated or computationally more powerful. And so there's a lot of similarities. And I was aware of the in the nonlinear time series, Tom's threshold models, and I played with the earlier days there, and I even tried to use the slice inverse regression to see what's going on. But I don't have any paper written up. I see a lot of interesting pictures. A lot of one of my students was braving, but this is just by nature. If I cannot come up with something mathematically which is neat, I set it aside. But this is not a good habit, I must admit. Computing is getting more and more powerful, and you should try to reach and do not. So I believe that there will be a more subtle change that you can look. But anyway, the change is the key. That's only I say, and that's key with this economic world. Everything's changing, and we have this not forecasting but uncasting.
那现在我想小学生可以学到耳类，看得出，看清楚。现在再大一点的话，就学流动的这个耳类型。That's a top. That's great.
Alright.
大概
It's easy to
初
see.
中学生一定会懂。
Alright. Yeah, well, I tested my daughter. She said she understood it.
What George just said is even the advanced school student can understand correlation.
对，这现在到初中就可以知道这个流动的 correlation。 No, it's hidden. Just hidden changing correlation. It's a great talk. Very, very clear.
There's nothing new under the sun, I must say.
That's probably correct. There's nothing new under the sun.
Any other questions, comments? I think we have, yeah.
I feel very lucky to be here, right time, right place. I learned a lot today. And Professor George Tiao just said Professor Lee should talk to the econometrician, but I think we econometricians need to talk to Professor Lee more. So I was the one who gave us presentation in the morning about instrumental variable. I just realized in many structural econometrics model, we relate the variable of interest y on x. But due to some endogeneity problem, we need second equation x on z. And after the talk, Professor Rui Chai said, why do you do two steps in two separate equations? Statisticians tend to plug the second equation to the first equation, so the correlation between y on x and then x on z become a function of z. So then I didn't realize until Professor Chow mentioned that there was some IV related talk. Maybe he was thinking that I was not even imagining, and I feel very grateful for all the comment that I received and learning opportunities. Thank you.
Rather to raise a layman's question about the big data. Can the big data be applied to a personal health or medicines? Specifically, is to do or not to do. We have this dilemma to let the medical intervention or not to do. So, for instance, my brother doesn't believe in Western medicines. And I happen to be in Western medicine, I major in pharmacy. So my question is, can the economic models to provide us some of the knowledge about behavioral changes? For instance, some scientists say we have to maintain our health to do three things. Exercise daily, and then don't drink, don't smoke, which I do everything. So, and I have a doubt. The personal medicine now is on the rise. So can the big data applies to personal health from to do or not to do to a scenario?
Well,
thank you.
That's the dream, right? The dream of this Obama initiative. If you read carefully and a lot of details in outline there, if those items can be fully implemented, I don't know at what cost, then what you are saying is possible. Everybody would have his computer hooked up with the cloud somewhere, and every day you wake up and see, hey, do I have to go to exercise or not? Like George Tiao at the 3 drink last night, and perhaps punch your car. Probably not. Or, well, I sleep well, and so generally I can do 10 push-ups. Then, I can do this. I can afford to have 10 drinks a day, and so on. Life will be more enjoyable. And certain days that you feel that your memory began fade a little bit. You're afraid of you got this Alzheimer's disease, and you can hit the now button, and that will probably stimulate certain nice memory from your past, and that would sort of smooth out your neural systems, and you become recharged again. So all those diseases can be cured. So that's the promise. But I'm not able to live that long to see how it is fulfilled.
it's a very interesting talks, and like this guest said, Now, for instance, the trick for the economic analysis, we always say, other things being equal, then we try to focus on something. Seems to me it's like use a microscope to watch something. And now, because of the micro data, then when we use a microscope, then find this another world that's maybe so huge, as you said about the gene and such kind of thing. Then if this is the case, when we say partial, then we say general equilibrium, general theory of Keynesian theory. Then that means that we broaden the scope to watch what we are interested in. Then from yours, let's say called LA, let's say seems provide us a new idea, to see such kind of thing. Then, but you are so conservative, so say the precision economic forecasting is our risk. If we use that, then you have some advice for this? Thank you.
Well, my advice is that don't say what you don't know. We can discuss what we know, but don't say what you don't know. But this is the word. A lot of forecasts simply try to persuade nobody. We say. But I would like to draw back to this. I think that it's probably not going to be in the immediate future. But this AlphaGo stuff is really very inspiring stories. It's already deal with very complicated situations, and you can see that there are a lot of things you can draw the analogies. They are different strategies. Of course, they probably do not use liquid association yet, but a lot of the changing is moving. Say, if I play this mode and if these guys counter with others, what should I do the next 10 moves and so on? It's a lot of situations. But it's very complicated. We'll see it's very complicated, right? And have a lot of micro situations to evaluate and such. But with enough daring and effort, that things can be done. Of course, life is not just playing the goal. The rules are not rigid. We have very flexible rules there. So you can say it's not immediately available. But I think there's still some hope to a certain extent. At least we will probably make less mistakes. Or if you make mistakes, you will probably know how to correct it more quickly than before.
I think we already passed the time. I'd like to make two comments before we close the session. First one, Professor Lee, the institute is very close to here. So you want to talk to him, it's not so far away. Okay, it's on the campus. Okay. The second one, we talk about big data. You have to remember, not all the data are useful. Okay, there are a lot of noises. So you cannot expect that I give you tons of data, you will find a solution for me. That's not true. Okay, nothing is free. You still have to study that. Okay, so with that, let us thank the Professor Lee again for the wonderful, inspiring talk.